Hello, my name is Steve. Welcome to Essay. Today I will tell you about a bizarre murder that happened in Italy. A woman was found dead in her office. After investigation, the police found several suspects. 5 of them were the most suspected. The police then conducted detailed investigations on them one by one, but each of them could not be completely ruled out as suspects. What happened in the office that day? What is the connection between the suspect and the woman? Next, I will tell you the story. The story takes place in Rome, which is located in the west-central Italian Peninsula and the capital of Italy. Rome is a world-renowned historical and cultural city, as well as the largest and most populous city in the country. The protagonist of the story is called Simonetta Cesaroni. She was born in November 1969. She is 21 years old. She works for a local business services company. Simonetta was recently assigned as a temporary accountant for a client. The client's company located in a building in downtown Rome. There are several buildings in this block, and the client company is located in room 7, floor 3, building B. It should be pointed out that building B is a comprehensive building, which not only has offices but also some residential apartments, and there are some residents in it. Young Simonetta was unfamiliar with the place, and the location where she worked was a bit difficult to find, and even her boss couldn't tell the exact location. Simonetta comes here every Tuesday and Thursday from 4 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. for temporary accounting work. This state has been going on for a while, and everything seems normal. But no one would have thought that something strange happened here on a summer night. August 7, 1990 was a Tuesday. Simonetta went out to work in the client's office building at around 12 o'clock in the afternoon as usual. On this day, she was wearing a black and white shirt and a pair of blue sports tights. She arrived at the client's company by subway at 3:45 p.m. when there were no other employees in the office and she was alone there. Such a situation is not new to Simonetta. She had similar experience before. Simonetta's office was at the end of the hallway, and upon arriving she was quickly start her job. The time quickly came to 5:15 p.m. Simonetta noticed that the data on the form might be wrong, so she called a colleague. She told her colleagues to try to send her work data within 10 minutes, then ended the call. But no one would have thought that this was her last phone call. It's 8:30 in the evening. Simonetta's parents are at home waiting for their daughter. It seemed a little unusual today, because their daughter would have gone home at this time. Today, she still hasn't come back, which makes her parents feel a little worried. The two waited for another hour, and the time came to 9:30. They haven't seen their daughter come home, so they go out to find her along the way she went home every day. They went to the subway station and bar near their home, and then there was no trace of their daughter. They then went to the home of their daughter's boss, Salvatore Volponi. Volponi surprised by their visit. He said Simonetta should have called him at 6:20 p.m. to report on the progress of the work. But Simonetta hadn't called him yet, which made Volponi feel weird. He then called other colleagues at the company to ask for the exact address where Simonetta was going to work. Volponi then drove to the client company with his son and Simonetta's parents. At 11:30 in the evening, a group of 4 people arrived at their destination. They entered building B and came to the door of room 7 on the 3rd floor. They tried to turn the doorknob and found that the door was locked, and through the frosted glass outside, a light could be faintly seen inside the house. Then they knocked on the door, but no one responded. So they went downstairs to the doorman of the building to get the keys. A doorman said that they did have the door key, but the key is with a doorman named Vanacore, and they don't know where he is now. Following the guidance of the other doormen, they found Vanacore's wife. She said that the key is with her now, but she is reluctant to open them, because that would violate the privacy of other residents. They immediately explained what happened, and Vanacore's wife agreed to open the door because of the emergency. She took them to the third floor of Building B and opened the door of the office. Volpone walked in first. The room was surprisingly quiet, and they could clearly hear their own breathing and footsteps. Volpone checked 2 rooms with the lights on, but there was nobody inside. Then they walked down the corridor together, to the end, where there was one last room they haven't checked. They were stunned by the scene as the office door was slowly opened. They saw Simonetta lying on the ground, with no vital signs. They immediately called the police. The police immediately went to the scene to investigate. The victim, 21-year-old Simonetta, fell to the ground wearing only underwear, white socks and shoes neatly placed in the corner. She had more than 20 stab wounds, 3 of which were fatal. There were suspected bite marks on her neck, presumably she had been beaten. But there were no signs of fighting in the room, and Simonetta's clothes and belongings were not found at the scene or any tools for committing the crime. Police speculate that the killer handled the scene and took Simonetta's clothes after committing the crime. Several stains were found on the room's doorknob and telephone, suspected to be traces left by the killer. However, doorknobs and telephones are public goods, and traces of other people's use cannot be completely ruled out. In 1990, the technology to detect clues by DNA was immature, and it took a long time to extract and test the DNA. As a result, the police are temporarily unable to determine the composition of those stains and who left them. Judging from the wound, the murderer used a tool similar to a letter opener. The body of the deceased showed no signs of being violated. The forensic doctor concluded at the time of the deceased's killing was between 6 o'clock and 6:30 in the afternoon. Judging from the scene, the murderer may have tried to sexually assault Simonetta but failed, so he became angry and murdered. On the morning of the second day of the incident, the police questioned all the residents in the building one by one. Police learned there were only 2 people in Building B at the time of the incident, one was Simonetta and the other was Cesare Valle. He is a well-known local engineer who is 88 years old this year. Simonetta works on the 3rd floor of Building B and Valle lives on the 5th floor of Building B. There were a total of 4 guards on duty that day. Doormen said they had been around between 4 p.m. and 8 p.m. that day and did not see anyone entering the building. But 3 of the 4 said doorman Vanacore was not with them between 5:30 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. that day. After learning of this clue, police found Vanacore for questioning. During questioning, police noticed that Vanacore would occasionally talk to himself. He said he went to a nearby hardware store at 6 p.m. to buy something, then went to buy a cup of coffee, and finally returned to the building. After returning, he watered some plants in the building by himself, so he was not with the other 3 guards during that time. During the conversation, officers keenly noticed that there appeared to be some blood on Vanacore's pants. Vanacore explained that he had hemorrhoids, which he accidentally got on his pants. Police then asked Vanacore why he had keys to various rooms in the building. He explained that in addition to his job as a doorman, he is also responsible for the plant maintenance and cleaning of the building, so he has the keys to all the rooms in the building, including the key to room 7 on the 3rd floor of Building B where Simonetta is located. Police then came to Vanacore's residence to conduct a search. After some searching, they found a receipt from a hardware store, but the time on the receipt was 5:25 p.m. on the day of the crime. This deviates from the 6 p.m. trip to the hardware store stated in Vanacore's statement. A witness said he saw Vanacore go to Valle's house on the 5th floor of Building B at 10:30 p.m. that night. However, Valle himself said that Vanacore arrived at his house at 11 p.m., which is another half-hour deviation. We know the forensic medical examiner concluded that Simonetta was killed between 6 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. Simonetta was found dead at 11:30 p.m., giving the suspect plenty of time to deal with the scene. Vanacore has time to commit the crime, has the key to the house, and is familiar with the environment inside the building. The main thing is that he could not give an alibi, and the time stated in the confession did not match the facts, and it seemed that he was deliberately concealing something. This made the police think they had found the real killer. The motive of the doorman, Vanacore, was to sexual assault Simonetta, and after his failure he killed her. Doorman Vanacore was arrested by police 4 days after the incident. DNA extraction and testing are proceeding in an orderly manner. 27 days after the incident, the laboratory successfully extracted DNA from 2 pieces of evidence. But the police did not expect the test results to show that the DNA did not match Vanacore's. Not only that, the lab also confirmed that the blood on Vanacore's pants belonged to himself. The results of the above tests contradicted police predictions. They did not have enough evidence to bring charges against him, and Vanacore was released. During the investigation, a man named Valle told police that Federico Valle, the grandson of engineer Valle, was likely the murderer. He said that on the day of the crime, Federico entered Building B to visit his grandfather. Valle said he had a good relationship with Federico's mother, and he had heard from her that Federico had gone home after visiting his grandfather on the day of the crime. At that time, he walked into the bedroom soaked wet without a word. There was a wound on his hand and there seemed to be blood on his clothes. Federico had suspected that his father had an affair with Simonetta, which may have been his motive for killing. After getting this clue, the police found Federico. Federico said that the wound on his hand was accidentally made by himself, and some bloodstains on his clothes were also his own, and he had nothing to do with the case. In addition, Federico claimed that he did not visit his grandfather that day, but went elsewhere, and 3 people can prove it. Even so, the police extracted Federico's DNA, which did not match the DNA at the scene. Police have temporarily ruled out Federico as a suspect. After this, police received an anonymous letter expressing the hope that the police would investigate Volponi, Simonetta's boss. In fact, the police had already investigated Volponi, who was the first people to enter the crime scene. However, someone provided Volponi's alibi, and his DNA did not match the DNA on the physical evidence. Therefore, his suspicion was temporarily ruled out. In the following years, the police launched a series of investigations, but the case has not progressed. Gradually the case became an unsolved case. In September 2006, 16 years after the Simonetta case, the killer has still not been found. With the advancement of forensic investigation technology, the DNA technology used in criminal investigation is also becoming more and more mature. All the evidences in this case were also properly preserved, and the laboratory re-examined the evidences. Technicians successfully extracted trace amounts of saliva from Simonetta's underwear that day, and extracted male DNA from it. Several suspicious stains on the doorknob of the room and on the telephone landline were not bloodstains, and the exact composition was unknown. After grasping this clue, the police re-investigated the suspects who had been excluded before. Police re-extracted DNA from more than 30 suspects, including Simonetta's then-boyfriend, Busco. The information shows that Simonetta had a heated argument with her boyfriend before the incident, and they had a fight to the point of breaking up. He was one of the main suspects at the time, but he also provided an alibi at the time. And Simonetta's office is so secluded that even her boss and parents don't know the exact address. Busco had never been to the place, so he was ruled out that year. Lab tests soon came back, and the DNA found on Simonetta's underwear matched Busco's. To make sure the result was correct, the forensic doctor extracted his DNA again for comparison, and the result was still the same. Busco was arrested by police. On February 3, 2010, which was 19 years after the incident, the case was officially opened for trial. The prosecution cited some new evidence. At that time, there was a suspected tooth imprint on Simonetta's body. After comparing it with Busco's tooth, it was found that these tooth imprints were partially consistent with Busco's tooth imprint. Simonetta's sister Paula told the court that the underwear Simonetta was wearing that day was washed by their mother, but there was Busco's saliva on it. In addition, Busco has said that on the day of the incident, he and a friend repaired his motorcycle in a small shop near his home, and they have been together. But now Busco's friend has changed his confession, saying he was not with Busco that afternoon. As a result, Busco's original alibi is invalid. The court issued a verdict after 11 months of trial. Defendant Roniero Busco was convicted of murder and sentenced to 24 years in prison. After the verdict, Busco pleaded not guilty and appealed. The Simonetta case went to trial 10 months later. The defense was well prepared this time, and they first questioned Simonetta's teeth marks. They said the so-called tooth prints were only partially consistent with Busco's, not completely consistent. The forensic doctor also said that it was impossible to determine that what on Simonetta's body was a tooth mark, which may be a special wound similar to a tooth mark formed by a lesion. Also, even though the underwear Simonetta wore that day was washed by her mother, it's not 100% sure that it will be cleaned. The forensics also re-examined the underwear had some other residues in addition to Busco's DNA. The residue may have kept saliva from being washed off, so Busco's DNA may have been left on before the crime. The court also accepted these arguments. In this way, the DNA evidence for Busco's conviction has changed from direct evidence to circumstantial evidence. The court issued a verdict after 5 months of trial. Defendant Roniero Busco was acquitted of murder and released in court. It took Busco more than a year to reverse the case for itself and finally succeeded. If the murderer wasn't him, who would it be? Police were actually re-investigating another suspect during the Busco trial. That was the police's first suspect that year, the doorman Vanacore. While there wasn't enough evidence to charge him, the police never completely ruled him out. Since he has no alibi, he is theoretically the most likely suspect. In the past 10 years, the police have investigated him one after another. But in March 2010, when prosecutors first charged Busco, Vanacore jumped into the sea and committed suicide. All he left behind was a note, which read, "20 years of suffering and doubts have kept me from living, at least keep this away from my family now finally." The case remains unresolved after more than 20 years of investigation. Judging from the evidence available, the police have listed all the suspects and cannot be ruled out as suspects. Police couldn't prove them guilty, but they couldn't prove them innocent either. The DNA on the doorknob and phone at the scene does not guarantee that it was left by the suspect, and may even have nothing to do with the case. Valle, who was 88 at the time, were in the building on the day of the crime. It is worth noting that he was a famous architectural engineer, and the building he lived in was designed by himself. At that time, the police mainly suspected his grandson Federico, but in theory Valle is also suspected of committing the crime. Neither the police nor the media disclosed much of Valle's information in the year of the incident, so it is impossible to know how his suspicion was ruled out. Valle died in 2001. The Simonetta case remains an unsolved case to this day. Who was the murderer of the day? Maybe only Simonetta herself knew.